Today's speaker in the La Trobe Innovation Series is Christine Axton, Director in Monitor Deloitte's Strategy Practice. Her presentation is entitled, "In the Industries Plagued by Most Uncertainty, How do Companies Hold on to Their Ability to Innovate? And how do they achieve and keep an innovation premium in the market?" Christine presents a short overview of the business tool Innovator's method and illustrates its application in a case study. Now, the Innovator's method is designed to help firms create and maintain an innovative premium, and more specifically, to manage uncertainty in the innovation process. The approach seeks to manage uncertainty across the key end-to-end innovation processes for startups, that is, insight, problem, solution, and the business model. Where Innovator's method differs from other tools such as lean startup, agile software, for example, is primarily with regard to the steps of the innovation process that they emphasise. The Innovator's method offers a set of tools and methods to consider and test uncertainty at each of the end-to-end innovation process steps. The power of this approach is that it ensures startups don't go to the market wasting time and resources on things customers don't want. Many startups make the mistake of heading straight to solution without first understanding the real problem and uncertainty associated with their product or service. So please enjoy Christine's presentation.
Thanks, Ben. Hello. And for everybody who came to the masterclass this morning, I'm sorry if there's a little bit of a repeat in this. I've tried to make it a little bit different this afternoon. And I'm going to be talking about dresses because, it's that time of the day, right? I'm slightly joking, but that is the case study. So who has heard of the Innovator's method? Who has heard of it who wasn't in the masterclass this morning? Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little bit of an explanation of... Sorry. Can you guys hear me, by the way? Fantastic. Because I'm not very coordinated, so trying to manage mics and things is not that great. So, in a nutshell, it's a process to manage uncertainty. So for innovators, to manage the uncertainty. And we've heard lots, I think, today and yesterday about the various tools like design thinking, agile software, lean startup, etc. So clearly, lots of disciplines are actually trying to solve this problem of uncertainty in innovation so that we don't waste resources and time and energy on things that customers aren't interested in. So a couple of innovators came up with the Innovator's method, and it's actually based on research with hundreds of established companies and startups. They're actually observing the processes that they went through. They started up with the Innovator's DNA, which aims to help disruptive innovators to generate insights. However, that wasn't sufficient because once you've identified the idea, you then need to know, is it worth pursuing? Have I got something that's worth investing in? How do I know if I've nailed the solution? So to answer those questions, the authors actually reviewed and synthesised emerging perspectives from these other disciplines. And so I told you I wasn't very coordinated. So essentially, this is the Innovator's method. It takes you through a process from insight, through problem, through solution, through to the business model. It's essentially like a bag of tools at each step. And what we find is, and we use this ourselves on various projects, at various stages you might use different tools. And it looks nice and linear. It's not always as linear as this. Sometimes you have to go back on steps. But also try to map out, so how does it compare with these other tools? And there might be some arguments about to what extent this is an accurate mapping of where those tools sit. But it's a reasonable gauge. So, for example, open innovation across the insight and problem space, design thinking across that sort of insight, problem and starting solution space, agile software mainly on the problem and solution, and then lean startup, solution and business model, etc. So, why do we need it? Yes, we all know about uncertainty, but why do you really need to employ something like the innovator's method or any of the other tools that we've talked about? The reason is that the traditional tools basically work really poorly in uncertainty. So the amount of business cases that have been written on the basis of a hypothesis, which is a great hypothesis, but all we do is prove that hypothesis. We don't actually resolve any of the uncertainty that exists. And hopefully, I've got one case study that I want to just walk through in the next 10 to 15 minutes, which will demonstrate why this is a really useful tool, why this sort of grab bag of tools in the innovator's method helps to resolve that uncertainty. So, what is the case study? Starting with the insights. And insights are all about finding that surprise area. So the clue that you've learnt something new that might be a valuable insight is when you're basically surprised by something. And that's what we're searching to do in this insight space. Find something that's worth solving. Find some kind of idea that customers and people in the particular segment that we're trying to target are trying to solve. And there are a few different tools in this first step. There's the 5 discovery skills, there's the insight capture system, and then there's 2 tests. There's the vote test and the proof test. And the outcome that we're looking for is to find that opportunity insight, something that's worth pursuing. Now, unfortunately in 20 minutes I don't have time to take you through every single one of these tools, but I'll just take you through one of them and show you how it might be used. So what's the case study? So the case study that I'm going to look at is Rent the Runway case study. So for those of us who like designer dresses and can't afford them, basically. So in 2008, Jen Hyman, a second-year MBA student, had an aha moment. She had one of those insight moments. She noticed her sister struggling to decide what to wear to a wedding. Jen realised that other people like her sister, fashion-conscious young people, might have a similar problem. The dress that they wanted to wear was completely out of their reach. So she hypothesised a solution to renting designer dresses online. She was advised to write a business case that would identify the customer need, describe the product or service, estimate the size of the market, estimate the revenues and profits based on the projections of pricing, and she didn't do it. She did something quite different. So I talked about one of the tools, and this tool is the 5 discovery skills. Essentially looking at questioning, observing, networking, experimenting in order to identify the insight and work out whether something's worth pursuing. So instead of the business case, Jen recruited her classmate to help her experiment and test demand to the answer to the 2 questions here. So she had 2 initial uncertainties. It seemed like a good idea, but would middle-class women rent a designer dress if it was available at 1/10 of the retail price? And would they return them in a good condition? So in order to test that, she borrowed or bought 130 dresses and set up an experiment to rent the dresses to undergrads. Of the 140 undergrads who came to view the dresses, 35% ended up renting one, and 51 to 53 mailed them back in a good condition. The experiment resolved some of the uncertainty wrapped up in the two questions. So our next step was actually to nail the problem and discover the job to be done. There were still areas of uncertainty. And so in this stage, we're trying to deeply understand the problem that we're trying to solve. Make sure that the problem that we think we're trying to solve is the one that the customer wants to solve. So most managers start with the solution before ensuring that they've discovered the problem worth solving. And there are a number of tests in here. So the tools are the pain storm and ethnography, and the tests are a cold call test and a smoke test. And the outcome that we're looking for is the customer vision statement. Now again, I don't have time to take you through all of them, but let's just have a look at one of them. So the pain storm method, which is extremely powerful. So essentially the purpose of the pain storming is to gain clarity on what you think the problem is so that you can test your hypotheses. So generating a problem hypothesis, identifying the customer and the job to be done, creating a journey line, so a journey map of what the customer actually does, and then identifying the pain points and emotions, selecting the biggest pain points, picking a root cause, and then identifying the assumptions. So Jen's initial insight led her to the hypothesis that we've said before, that instead of purchasing designer dresses, women might prefer to rent them online. But would they rent dresses they couldn't try on? And would women rent dresses if they have more options? So they set up a second trial, this time on a different campus, allowing women to see the dresses but not to try them on. This time they had more dress options because the first experiment had many women that didn't rent because they didn't find the right option. And what they showed was that 55% rented dresses because they had more options. Now they'd nailed the job to be done, make women feel special, confident, and desirable, and they were ready to test the big idea. Would women rent the dresses online? So we come to the next step in the innovators method. So solutioning, prototyping the minimum awesome product. In this one, again, we've got quite a few different tools in the bag. Solution storming, 4 prototypes, 3 tests, so the WOW test, the NPS test, and the payment test. And then the outcome that we're looking for is that we can actually arrive at our minimum awesome product. So using the prototypes to validate the solution minimizes the investment, accelerates the learning because you actually discover things in the process of the prototyping that you might not have known before, and it allows you to test the assumptions that could alternatively kill your idea. So the next step that they went through was they took photos of the dresses, created PDFs, very simple, ran a test in New York with 1,000 women in their target market, emailed them the dresses, and then gave them the option of renting the dresses. And their minimum viable prototype showed that 5% of women looking for a special occasion dress were willing to rent online. From there, they went on to iterate to the minimum awesome product, where RTR Fashion actually has advisors to help their customers, essentially trying to sort of imitate that sort of best friend who'll help you with picking out the outfit, picking your shoes, picking the accessories that go alongside it. And when needed, they could ship extra sizes if they wanted. And so we come to the final stage. So now that we've got our minimum awesome product, we really actually need to move to that next step of a business model that will actually validate the go-to-market strategy. And in this step, again, lots of different tools in the kit bag for the innovators method. But the one that I just want to talk through with you is actually the very simple business model snapshot. So from here, the girls wanted to make sure they had their go-to-market strategy that would work. Typically, once again, you need to experiment at this point. So to test the hypotheses, to develop the right pricing model, to cover the operational activities, key resources, channels to market, key relationships. So their initial hypothesis on the channels to market was that they would actually go via existing designer websites, so that they would actually be the fulfillment arm to those existing designer websites. But they were wrong. So they tested it, and they tested it by actually experimenting and going and sampling and asking first. The designers were worried that they would cannibalize their market. They just weren't willing to do it. So they had to pivot. So a pivot was required to adapt that business model from a fulfillment partner to more of a Netflix-style model. And I'm hoping that I'm keeping to time. And so hopefully that just gives you like a really brief snapshot of the sort of some of their tools and the process of the innovators method. And I think the RTR experience provides a brief snapshot of that how-to of the innovators method. It's basically a series of experimentation cycles that resolve uncertainty around the problem that you're trying to solve, and the solution and the business model. Obviously, it looks very neat and linear. It doesn't really typically happen like that. The other thing is that you typically don't use every single tool in the kit bag. You use the ones that you feel you need to resolve the particular areas of uncertainty. And that's what we see both with the startups that we observe and the ones that we work with and the organisations that we work with. So thank you for that.